In this episode of Special Assignment, our last installment in a three-part series on the medical negligence of elderly patients inside our public hospitals. In part 1, we brought you the story of the 76-year-old Martha Mare, whose abuse in Mamelodi Hospital was caught on camera.
What happened to the out that they gave when they took the job? What happened to the love and care for old people?
In part 2, we told the harrowing story of 80-year-old Gail Phillips, whose prolonged stay in Witbank Hospital led to the development of advanced bed sores in a health facility plagued by water cuts, staff shortages and unusable theatres. Gail eventually died of septicemia after more than 2 months in hospital. In this episode, Brenda and Jaco share their grief after their mother, Marie Fritz, a pensioner, went to Middelburg Hospital for an emergency hernia operation. But most of the hospital's theatres were reportedly not operational, and she was referred to the nearby Witbank Hospital, where more delays in her treatment led to her unexpected death. Other grief-stricken families still wait for closure almost 4 years after their elderly loved ones died inside Middelburg Hospital. Now, one lawyer is leading the charge against the notorious hospital, where the number of deceased elderly patients is stacking up. On 14 October last year, while visiting her daughter and son-in-law before embarking on a long-planned trip around South Africa with her husband, the active pensioner Marie Fritz started feeling unwell.
She looked unwell, she was pale, she had a lot of pain, she was grey in the face. She couldn't sit up straight, she was lying all the time. My husband and I took her to Midmed Private Hospital around about 6 o'clock on that Monday evening. They sent her for x-rays, a sonar and some blood tests. So they picked up the hernia and then bowel obstruction. With the doctor's account, the bloods, the x-rays, the sonars, it was about 8,700 rand, and it was paid cash that very same day.
The family was assured Marie will recover from her hernia operation, but the private hospital demanded an upfront deposit of 160,000 rand for the procedure. The family was unable to come up with this kind of cash.
The doctor then said he will give me his referral, all those documents, the x-rays, the sonar, if I took her to the provincial hospital, which I did. And we arrived there just past 8 in the evening. Their system were offline, so they couldn't open a file. So we sat and we waited, but the place was full. There was about 60 people in there, in the waiting area, in the emergency room. So my mother started to experience pain again, so there was no place for her to lie down or even sit comfortably. So she went outside and lied in a bed, on a bed, outside of the hospital.
The family says almost 3 hours later, doctors in Middelburg Hospital's casualty ward informed them that they were unable to do the operation.
He then wrote everything down on the file, and he went to front and tried to call Witbank Hospital to arrange the operation. They don't do operations at Middelburg because they don't have the facilities. They don't have a theatre, unfortunately. When he came back with the file and said they're going to admit her to the hospital because they don't have space in Witbank, he put a tube through her nose to relieve the obstruction in her bowel.
Brenda says Marie would spend the next 5 days in Middelburg Hospital waiting to be referred to Witbank Hospital for treatment. Then on Friday the 18th of October, Brenda says she received a distressing call.
She called me from her phone and she said, Brenda, they're going to move me to Witbank Provincial Hospital with the ambulance. I am having an emergency operation. So I was like, wow. What happened? So she said she had a setback the previous evening and they had to remove the hernia. But at that stage, the hernia burst already. So all that stuff was outside of her body. They said she needed an emergency operation. At 13:58, I've sent my husband a voice note telling him that it's an emergency
Ironically, Mari Fritz was admitted to the same ward as Gail Phillips, who was also fighting for her life. Both women's families believe Witbank Hospital was unable to intervene in the elderly patient's desperate medical plight.
Some of them were sitting in the ward, the station, the nursing station, laughing, showing each other videos on the cell phone, and then crying out of love. There was no one attending to her. I gave my mother a box to vomit in, and that's how my nephew helped her to vomit into the box.
But Brenda says her now frantic family waited while the hours went by without any emergency intervention, and Mari's condition rapidly deteriorated.
How long, in other words, were you guys waiting for the operation to take?
9.5 hours. Yeah, and she was first on their list. My mother wanted to vomit, and there was nothing for her to vomit in. There was no bucket, nothing. So I asked a male, I don't know if he was a nurse at that moment, I did not know. So I asked him, sorry nurse, can you please assist me? My mother wants to vomit. So he cut me off immediately. He said, I am not a nurse, don't address me like that. I don't speak to white people, get out. So they chased me out.
Brenda says security guards then forced the family to leave the hospital. Shortly after midnight, they received a call that Mari had died and returned immediately.
When we entered the hospital, the very same guy that chased us at 9:30 was fast asleep, lying against the wall with his feet stretched out, sleeping. So I gently touched him on his arm to wake him, and I said, so my mother did pass away. So he was up in arms. Now he wanted to attack me. Now he's awake. He wanted to attack me. So we just went past. And we went to the ward, and then the learner doctor was there. I shouted and said, she was priority on your list. Why didn't you, it's 9.5 hours later. Now she died. What now? And she was just like, there was no space. We could not give her the operation. My moeder het so min gehad, maar sy was so dankbaar vir alles. Sy was ons eistervrou, sy was deur so baie in haar lewe, maar sy het aan haar baklei nooit gekla. Sy wou nooit 'n las vir enigiemand wees. Sy was net goed vir almal. Ek kan nie dink dat sy enigiemand ooit skade aangedoen het of lelik behandel het.
Brenda says the family finds it difficult to accept how Mari was treated in her final days, considering how compassionate her mother was towards others.
My mother was a very lively person. She was a loving person. Every single morning at 6 o'clock, my husband and I both received the same message. It's like an image with goeiemorgen or flowers or something, and then we replied and said thank you, and she would ask how we are. My mother was loved by plenty of people. Her funeral was huge.
Brenda says her family is shocked at the treatment they received at Witbank Hospital.
Why don't they help white people? White people is also poor. We get poor white people as well. Everyone must get the same treatment. If you're black or if you're white, you're Indian, you're colored, you must get the same treatment. It does not matter to us. But everyone must get the same treatment. And for someone with a professional management after his name he does not have the authority to speak to anyone like that.
The family was astonished by the dismal conditions inside Witbank Hospital.
I've got 5 theatres in Witbank, but only one is in use. That's the only one with electricity. So there's 1 theatre in use, and they're doing all the emergency C-sections prior to other operations. It's terrible. The tiles is out, so you can walk there and break your neck and die. There's in some of the hallways, there's no lights. The lights is out, the globes is out. The windows is broken, there's no linen, no pillows, no running water.
Stinks.
It stinks, it reeks of urine and death.
they never open to hear it. They try and cover up. As soon as
Activist Tess Rickert understands the shocking conditions in especially Mpumalanga's public hospitals all too well. Special assignment met her in 2016 during a protest against the poor medical treatment of elderly patients in Middelburg Hospital. Tess has been an advocate for efficient public health care ever since.
I've always been involved with medical cases, and it's always been my field of interest is medical cases, people being abused, our homes, old age homes, and the hospitals and that. Witbank Hospital have been battling with water supply. As far as I know, it's a huge problem there. Hygiene in some of the hospitals are good, but most of our hospitals fall by the wayside with hygiene. The public toilets are, I can't describe it. And most of the bathrooms that the patients also have to use, it adds to the problem with septicemia, septic wounds and that. Can't really use them.
Tess was also instrumental in getting media coverage in Gail Phillips's case. This eventually led to an unlikely concession by Witbank Hospital to allow a private wound care specialist to come and treat the elderly patient for stage 4 bed sores, which she developed during her prolonged hospital stay. But Gail lost her battle. The healthcare intervention she so drastically needed came too late. Maury Fritz's family says they remember Gail being totally unresponsive while sharing a ward with their mother.
She was very weak, and we can see that she had a lot of pain. She had drips on, there was drips, but it was empty. The drip packets were empty. It was in her flesh, but it was empty. There was a lot of, her family came to visit around about 7 o'clock, and they brought her clean water and a super M to drink, but like the bedside table was full of super M's and 5-litre waters and small little bottles of water, so she didn't drink it because she was not awake. Well, I think that they sedated her because after our commotion she did not even wake.
Gail's family says police initially refused to open an inquest into her death.
I went to the police station wanting to open up a case where I wanted a forensic autopsy done. And there were 3 sergeants there on duty, and these 3 sergeants, it can't be done. You must go to the sister, and you go to the sister at the hospital, and you tell the sister that you want a forensic autopsy done, and she will arrange it.
If she thinks it's necessary.
If she thinks it's necessary.
Gail Phillips's family eventually succeeded in opening a docket with the police, but 4 months on, the investigation has not moved, and they claim the hospital has not explained the apparent mishaps in the months leading up to Gail's death, and is yet to accept any responsibility.
I think that the investigating officer will subpoena the records. Whether he's going to get it and whether the records are going to be accurate and whether the records are going to be truthful, that is another point.
They try and cover up. As soon as you want to speak to them or you go to management, they start covering up. And that's when things disappear out of the files. They cover up.
This is how Special Assignment reported on the shocking case of Bets Klaasen in our 2016 expose about the 65-year-old pensioner's fatal stay in Middelburg Hospital. At her autopsy, Sankers took pictures of Bets's body as evidence. Riddled with bed sores, he says it seemed as if hospital staff left their mother to rot away.
Dit het baie sleg gegaan. Gerda was in die kamer en ek was nog buite besig. Toe ek so in die gang afstap, toe ryk ek iets is vrot. Dis seker nou maar die rotte wat hulle dalk nou gif gegooi het of ja, iets gebeur daarso. Toe ek so in die kamer instap, toe staan sy met 'n handdoek. Toe waai sy, toe sit net brommels in daai kamer en dit stink verskriklik. En ek gaan net vertel ek sê hoorie, wat gaan hier aan? Yeah, we will attend after visiting hours. Ek sê vir my Gerda, wil jy nie net vir my kyk? Toe sy die kombers so lig, ek het so half ingekyk. Toe loop daai geel-groen goed al op die laag en baie goed. Toe loop dit al. Dit vrot, dit stink.
nog nie skoon gemaak die wonde.
At the time, the Klassen siblings joined hands with the late Lina Kashani Shabangu's daughter Tandi after her elderly mother went through similar experiences inside Middelburg Hospital and eventually passed away.
More than a year after her death, the family is still devastated by the undignified way nurses treated Mrs. Shabangu.
On my side and my family side.
In this case, it's not an issue of facilities. This is negligence. This was a person was supposed to do his job or her job. This is not a question of facilities. No. Turning a patient for every 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, it doesn't need any machine or operators or whatever.
Hundreds of distraught family and community members took to the streets to protest for the rights of the elderly to dignified, efficient and effective healthcare.
Die binne in jou in die tyd wat jy by jou ma se bed staan en wat jy moet sien, hoe gaan sy agteruit. Weet jy, dat sy kry nie die regte behandeling nie. Jy smeek, jy soebat. En ek het geweet hulle maak foute, maar ons was weggejaag, ons was uitgeskel. So jy kan nie met hulle gepraat het nie.
We meet up with Bets Klassen's daughter Regina almost 4 years after our expose. The family has appointed attorney Anelda Collins to handle their mother's case. In the coming weeks, a case of medical malpractice will be heard before the Middelburg High Court. The Human Rights Commission of South Africa stepped in and facilitated a mediation process between the Klassen family and Middelburg Hospital. Medico-legal attorney Anelda Collins says during this process the hospital's management conceded there were problems.
Poor referral system, the proper tests hadn't been done, the records hadn't been kept, they'd been altered afterwards. And despite the fact that specific individuals had been identified in that investigation that had made themselves guilty of these transgressions, the suggested solution was that there should be almost a retraining program, a sensitization program, where the personnel would be essentially asked to do better.
Attempts to get comment from Middelburg Hospital yielded no results. Anelda says since representing the Bets Klassen case, she has taken on 15 similar cases of medical negligence involving Middelburg Hospital.
The injuries may differ and the outcomes may differ and the damages may differ. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing. The lack of care from nursing staff and attention to detail, administration of medication that's prescribed, instructions from doctors that are not being followed.
Liz Wilson-Chandler is considered one of South Africa's top wound care specialists. Her expert testimony is often sought in court for medical negligence cases.
And 99.6% of all pressure injuries are preventable, according to international stats. We have poor resources as far as trained staff are concerned, yet we're not making any adaptations to compromise for it. And that's where I think self-governance by the public is the only way we can stop this, or plug the hole in the meantime. Patients should do some research on what their rights are.
Liz says the crippling conditions inside our public hospitals erode healthcare workers' empathy.
It's compassion burnout, because when we're struggling to cope with all the trauma that we're experiencing in our lives, we tend to not want to experience other people's trauma too, so we block ourselves off. And we think that we're protecting ourselves when we're not. If you want to help somebody, you've got to be able to feel what that person is going through. How is it affecting them? How is it affecting them, their thought process? And the thought process is going to change the behavior. I don't know if it's the selection criteria is not right. We're desperate for nurses. We're taking nurses that should never have been nurses. We're not training them well enough. I don't really know because there's so many fractures. It's a matter of saying which is the one that's bleeding or hemorrhaging, and perhaps we should be plugging the hemorrhages up first.
Most of these problems do not have to do with a lack of facilities, a lack of money. Not feeding someone doesn't cost anybody more money to pick up a bowl of food already provided and feed a patient that cannot feed herself, or clean bed sheets that are already there and replace them with others. It doesn't cost extra money. It doesn't save any money by intimidating patients or being unpleasant to family. These are attitude problems, and these can be addressed quite easily and should be enforced. It's just easier to say we don't have the facilities, we don't have the money, and it's not our responsibility.
Nursing Union Denosa says despite world-class training of nurses in South Africa, poor hospital conditions severely impact the quality of healthcare.
With the acuity, the type of attention you need to afford to a particular patient demands more staffing. In the absence of them not attending to those patients, it results in medical legal hazards. Patients might skip not getting their treatment on time. Patients, because of their condition, will need to be changed so that circulation should improve. Now you can imagine you've got 3 nurses on duty. That makes it almost impossible and very difficult for them to afford and give that particular patient the type of assistance the patient will need.
Several attempts by Special Assignment to get comment from the National Health Department were unsuccessful. In a dysfunctional system facing a multitude of challenges, with many overburdened healthcare workers who suffer from burnout and empathy fatigue, who should be held responsible when protocols are not followed and healthcare needs not met?
The people I'm holding accountable on behalf of the family is the Department of Health. At the end of the day, the buck stops with them. There's no kicking the can down the road past that point. Discipline needs to start from the top, and at the end of the day, the failure lies with them.
Until such time when the employer comes to the party and take over its responsibility, we will minimize malpractices.
We all need to be held accountable, because when a patient is admitted into our care, it's not only me that looks after the patient. There's a doctor that's looking after the patient, there's a physio, there's a dietitian, there is a psychologist, there's a pharmacist, there's the cleaning lady, there's the guy that does the deliveries, there's the people that do the laundry. So there are a lot of people that are involved in making sure that if they do their jobs correctly, the patient will receive the best care.
For countless families like the Claessens, several attempts to hold Middelburg Hospital and its healthcare workers responsible for what they believe was medical negligence that led to their mother's death have failed.
Either we accept it for what it is and we deal with the standard of public medical care that we get at the moment, or we simply forge ahead and we carry on with our litigation to the point where they either conform or they collapse. Because make no mistake, people are being tortured in hospital, and that cannot be allowed to carry on. And if we have to be without them, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe starting from the bottom is the answer.
In our next episode, we keep the spotlight on the state of our healthcare system. We investigate the case of pediatric surgeon Peter Biel, who stands accused of medical malpractice that allegedly spanned decades.